Welcome to the show. I'm Eesha Patel, your producer and empowerment strategist. And today's show is about the Ascension. We have back Eesha Patel. Eesha Patel is an international channeler, speaker, author, and healer. She's a spiritual mentor to world-class coaches, speakers, and entrepreneurs who are here to serve humanity. Over the last 5 years, she's helped over 10,000 people and is the founder of the Origin Activation, a powerful multidimensional and energetic healing modality. I invited Eesha back on the show to talk about the ascension of the planet and what we can do to help. And we decided at the end of the show, after we stopped recording, that we were going to partner on bringing you a live guided visualization process so that if you feel called to make a contribution to the world, to your family, to yourself, and to increasing the frequency of the planet and possibly changing or adjusting the timelines of this ascension, we'd like to invite you to Friday, February 26th here in the US, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Eesha and I are going to do a live guided visualization process, and it will be recorded, and those that sign up can get the recording when it's done to continue using it like a meditation on a regular basis. You want to go to jjflazanes.com/Eesha, EESHA. And by the way, those of you that are new to the show, all of the links that I provide you here verbally are also in the show notes, or at least most of them. And they're not on my website. So you can't just go to my website and try to click around. You actually do need to memorize or write down or go to the show notes for anything after the /. So again, that's jjflazanes.com/Eesha, EESHA, to register to come onto the webinar to do this guided live visualization of the ascension with us together in live time. I also know that that will be the 27th of March in the morning in Australia. Not quite sure what time yet, but if you go to the site, you'll be reminded of those time zones, and the autoresponder emails will let you know if you're in other parts of the world, the different time zones that we'll be doing it in. Another note, I did mention a show that is not out yet with Ainsley McLeod about soul levels. So I've decided I'm going to publish that episode next week, not to leave you hanging, so that way we can dive a little deeper into these different layers of our consciousness and beingness and the things that we can do in this lifetime on planet Earth in our own bodies to help our lives as well as help others, and to look at things just a little differently from a broader perspective. So that can help ease any frustration, pain, anxiety, and help you to just sort of ease into and ground into who you are in this time and space. And then, of course, what can you do about it? So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Again, please join us, and anyone else that you may know would like to participate in something like this, please share today's show or share the link, jjflazanes.com/Eesha, EESHA. It's going to be a powerful guided visualization that I know is going to make a major impact, not only on the planet, but on us as individuals who are doing it together collectively as a community. Enjoy today's show. Welcome, everyone, to today's show. If you're watching this on video, it means that you haven't heard us yet on the podcast. Click the link below, and you can find this show also on the podcast to take it with you if you're driving or exercising. And if you're listening on the podcast, we did a video this time with Eesha. Come over to jjflazanes.tv to check out that video. Today, we're going to talk about the Ascension. It's a topic that we touched on last time I had Eesha on the show. We didn't have enough time to cover it, and it needs its own show. So first of all, welcome back, Eesha.
Thank you, JJ. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I'm very excited.
Well, for those that don't know what the Ascension is, let's give them a little brief synopsis of your work in the world with grid lines and with energy work, and then lead them into what is the Ascension and what are we doing?
Absolutely. So it's a very broad question, but I'll give you a very brief overview. We are going through, as a human race and as a planet, we're going through a process of evolution. And in that evolution is a raising of frequency. So we're talking about this shift that we're seeing in the world where people are starting to wake up and they're starting to change their beliefs. They're starting to challenge the status quo. They're starting to challenge the way that we live our lives. just a very brief history in the last couple of 100 years has been a massive movement, particularly in workplaces, careers, from industrialization into now. If you look at the millennial generations, they're people who are like, no, actually, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I want to hop in my caravan and I want to travel the world. Then you have people like Beyonce who are like, I'm going to fund the largest company for the biggest vegan burger in the world, and so we can see the shifts quite tangibly in how people are starting to raise their consciousness, ask more questions, and become more aware of who we actually are in this world. So that movement and that lifting and vibration is what we refer to as planetary ascension. And it is something that is a global movement. And some people are consciously aware of it, some people are not. And that's just different stages and layers to the journey. And I guess essentially this conversation today is, well, what is that ascension? What does it mean for me? And how can we really contribute to that process? Because at the end of the day, if you're on this planet, you are part of the planetary ascension. You might just not know right now what your role is within that.
It was really made clear to me recently with an interview that I did with Ainsley MacLeod. I don't know if you know who Ainsley MacLeod is. He wrote a book called The Instruction. He talks a lot about soul levels. We talked about the different soul levels of people, and he kind of did my reading, and I got to guess, and I guessed right. and he told me a little bit more about some past lives that I had and how that applied to my life right now. And one of the things that became really clear to me is how many young souls, new souls are sort of running this planet. And it feels like the old souls are a little quieter. We're less in the forefront in terms of making these decisions that are affecting the way that we're making choices, right? So having, like, as an older soul saying, I don't want that kind of life. I want something deeper. I want something more balanced. I want to follow my intuition, and I'm not buying into what's going on right now. So when we talked about it in that way, it just became really clear about some of the things that are going on, and sort of the mentality. Like, I link it to thinking of a toddler running the United States. And I don't mean that in terms of any particular government agency or whatever. I'm saying across the board that we are making, not me, not you, and probably not anyone listening to or watching this show right now, but the majority of people in the world are making their decisions based out of a lack of alignment, a lack of trust, and fear. And that is not new to this day and age. It has been going on forever. There was always going to be some degree of imbalance or balance in the world of people who are coming and going from lifetime to lifetime, adding to the contrast, adding to the expansion. But it's not the first time that I've heard from other people also like you. Gary Zukav came on the show and we talked about, I forget the term he used, but it's us sort of evolving into that next level, whether it be six, what is it? Not sixth sense, but six, not dimension. Maybe it was six dimension, six dimensional beings, or it had to be an expansion of sort of what we are now. So this has been bubbling up, especially on the show. It's been a theme, and my relationship to it and other people's relationship to it, Dr. Northrop and I had a show called The Great Awakening. We talked about the Great Awakening that's happening right now. But see, for those of us like you and I, possibly, and maybe you less because you're out and about traveling the world and doing your work, and I'm sort of stuck here only sort of seeing and hearing what I'm seeing and hearing, is that I guess I want some hope. I would like to see it from another point of view of what I feel is coming, but I'm not seeing it yet. And it's okay. I can visualize it. But that transformation, that transformative process of moving into a more of a conscious awareness, having people wake up a little bit more, having us more globally, collectively say, no, we're not going to do these fear-based, controlling-based, in this lifetime, small-minded things that are not propelling our species forward necessarily. So let's take this back to, I know for those of you that have not heard, Eesha's been on a show prior to this, so please make sure to go back and listen to that as well. We talked about money and abundance. We talked about her abundance Kickstarter program. We talked about, again, a little bit about this, and then your work in helping to make shifts on grid lines all over the world. So you've come into this lifetime. How would you describe your mission?
Wow, that's a huge question. Look, I had my, I guess you could say, spiritual awakening about 5.5 years ago, 2015. And that was when I realized that I was here to support a lot of people in the process of their awakening. When we talk about mission, it's so clear to me that my role is twofold. One is to guide humanity, so to actually work with people And the other aspect of my role is working with the actual planet itself. So a big part of my work involves traveling around the world to sacred sites, working with ley lines, working with grid lines, working with the actual energies of the land to bring more harmony into these places. I've actually got a really cool story back from 2017 when I felt guided to go to Sedona, which is in your country, in America. And I remember this trip felt like such a massive pilgrimage to me, because the trip, I think probably about a year in advance, I felt like I had to, before I even knew where I was going, I actually just heard from my guides as I was planning the 2017 year at the end of 2016. So it was about November 2016. And I just hear from my guides, keep the month of July free. And I thought, okay, cool. Like, that's a whole month. Like, I was like, why do you need me to have a whole month? You know, like, I was like, okay, no worries. So I booked my whole month, my whole year up until the end of June. And then from July, I just had nothing. I just knew that something was going to shift, and I kept that whole month clear. So I just booked it out months and months in advance. And then it got to about probably, I'd say March in 2017. And that's when I started receiving all this information, and Sedona just kept popping into my awareness. It was like, you have to go to Sedona. So I booked my flights. And again, this is where, I'm very, I guess, comfortable now with just taking the little pieces of guidance step by step as they come, knowing that I don't need the whole picture. I just need to trust in the next step of that staircase. So the first step was keep the month free. The second step was, I think I'm going to Sedona. The third step was, I'm definitely going to Sedona. And then it was like, okay, what's happening in Sedona? And then I realized, I was like, oh, of course, there's a 7-7 gateway coming up. And being 2017, there was a whole numerical thing behind it of like vibrational alignments and planetary alignments and things that were culminating on that particular date. So I booked all my flights, got it all organized, went to Sedona. Now, I remember about 21 days leading up to me being there for the 7-7 gateway, I just suddenly felt like my body just didn't want to eat anymore. Like, I just couldn't eat certain foods. And then leading up to those final 21 days, it was like I just ended up fasting. And it wasn't something that I decided to do. Like, I didn't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to do a 21-day intermittent water fast thing. It was just like, oh, my body just doesn't desire solid foods right now. And so I ended up fasting for the better part of 21 days, eating probably about one meal a day. And then in those final 3 days, it was just liquids, just liquids. I was doing vegetable broths. And by the time I arrived in Sedona, my body was just like, you are not eating anything, girl. Like, you need to lift your vibration so high. Just don't eat. And so yeah, I ended up having this incredible experience where my body was involved. I was traveling, there was a bit of jet lag and all that, obviously, as well. And then I got to the morning of the 7-7 gateway, and I just arrived in Sedona, I think just the day before. And I remember actually the day before when I had arrived, all I had to go off was this vision that I'd had of this red, it was like a red rock and some red sand. And that's all I had, And as I was driving into Sedona, I felt the energy shift as I got into this particular place. It's almost like this, like I crossed an invisible barrier. And as soon as I crossed that, I stopped at the first crystal shop I could find, which there's so many of them, it wasn't hard to find one. And so I went into the first shop that I pulled over into. And I just said to the lady, I was like, look, this sounds a little bit crazy. But I said, I have this vision of this big red rock and there's a thing. And I just described the whole thing to her. And that's all I'd seen in my meditation. I hadn't researched it, nothing. She points to this painting on her wall and says, does it look like that? And I was like, yeah, what is that? And she was like, that's Bell Rock. And so I was like, okay, cool. Tell me more. And then I realized that as I had been driving into that area, I'd gone and booked myself some accommodation for a few days. And the place that I'd booked was actually the Bell Rock Hotel or Motel or whatever it was. And like, without knowing, like I hadn't done any research or anything in this place. It was just like, oh, cool. Like, you're telling me I'm staying at the place that's as close to that rock as possible with a view of the rock that I need to go to for the 7-7 gateway. So it was all perfect, all lined up so beautifully. And then the morning of the 7-7 gateway, I went out and I just went for a walk into the bush, and I found this little clearing. And in that clearing, I just felt guided. And again, it was just so spur of the moment, spontaneous. I got all these rocks and I started putting them in a big circle. And then I realized I was making a medicine wheel. And so I made this whole medicine wheel, set it all up in the morning. And then I felt like, okay, cool, that's it. It's done. And then I felt like I had to just go rest for a little bit. I hadn't been eating, obviously, for a couple of days. Went home, had a nap. And then at 7 p.m. that same day, I felt like I had to come back. So at 7 p.m., I went back to the Bell Rock. But here's the funniest thing. And to this day, I do not understand what actually happened energetically or logistically, or whether my brain was just foggy but I went to go find that medicine wheel that I created, which wasn't that far. Like, I mean, it's not a massive area, really. And so I went back down the trail to find this spot where there was a clearing, and I made this big thing. And I walked around for about, I don't know, maybe half an hour or something. I could not find it. I just felt like I was in some sort of weird, like, time space warp. Like, my brain just couldn't comprehend. Like, I walked around in circles for ages and just couldn't find it. Anyway, so I was like, okay, no worries. And then I just found a little spot to meditate because I still wanted to finish doing the activation that we needed to do. So I did the process. I brought in these beautiful energies and just felt the whole like energy of the rock shifting. And I could literally see in my inner vision, the day before when I arrived, the actual vortex of the Bell Rock was kind of shaky. It was like a spinning wheel that wasn't quite spinning properly. And then after the meditation on the 7/7 at 7 p.m., suddenly it was like this very still vortex, like when you have a spinning top that's spinning perfectly still and it's almost like it's not moving. And soon as that happened, soon as that alignment came in and the meditation finished, I just heard from my guides. They said, stop, get up, leave now. And I was like, whoa, like it was very sudden, very, very sudden. And I looked up around me and I kid you not, there was this vortex of clouds that had come in while I was meditating that I hadn't even noticed, just above the rock. And then they said, just leave straight away. So as soon as I walked back and got into my hotel, it started bucketing down with rain. We hadn't had rain there for days. Like I'd been there in like Phoenix and stuff a few days before as well. And it was one of the hottest weeks actually of a very long time. In fact, that was the week when there was a massive heat wave in Phoenix. It was like 52 degrees and people were literally frying eggs on the side of the walks and posting pictures on social media. So yeah, when I went to Sedona and it was like really, really hot and suddenly did this activation, next thing the whole sky is filled with clouds and there's a thunderstorm. I was like, oh my God, what just happened? It was crazy. I've got photographs and everything. Like it was just insane.
It is normally very hot in Arizona and it doesn't normally rain in July. If we're talking about July 2017, it's not necessarily a rainy season there from what I understand.
No.
So this kind of work that you've been doing is literally just being guided and led. And we did talk about that on the last show because I remember thinking, God, that's freedom right there. That trust, right? That's the deepest trust I think one can have is to really trust the messages you're getting and then to act on them. So often I think people get blocked up because they are receiving messages they're not listening to. And sometimes they're not in the frequency to receive those messages, but even when they get them over and over again, they can't take the hint. So just to imagine that level of trust that you've cultivated, developed, and now actualize is amazing. But when it comes to the ascension, so you're doing this grid line work and it's to balance out the planet. It's to help the planet do what?
So each particular sacred site does play a slightly different but harmonizing role in the bigger picture of everything. So for example, that Sedona vortex was anchoring some powerful energy lines. And because at the time there was some distortion in the frequency, they sent me over to go and basically just restore, that balance and that harmony in that frequency. And there's many reasons why this can happen. I mean, if you understand that there's this collective role we all play together in this ascension, there's the energy of the planet, but there's also the contribution of all the energy of all the people on the planet, and our thoughts, our frequency, our energy radiates out. And, sometimes it can affect the energy lines of the planet. So when you have a lot of people that are focusing certain energies into certain areas, sometimes it's not always of the highest vibration. And sometimes a lot of this is unconscious as well. Like people don't realize we're doing this, but there's just so many people on the planet right now that aren't even connected to it. And so just the disconnect alone is enough sometimes to just create things in energy at the energetic realm of like, just distortions or things that are not holding properly. So that particular vortex, for example, was not fully stabilized in its energy. So when I went over there and I did my little piece of, just restabilizing it, that would have then connected in back to all the other grid lines and all the other node lines. And that one in particular, so Sedona connects to Lake Titicaca, it connects to Uluru, it connects to Mount Shasta. I did actually go to Mount Shasta in that same trip because I had to carry those energies across from Sedona to Mount Shasta in California, because those two spots have a very strong connection. But then the bigger, I guess, picture of all of that is that every time I go and do this work on the land, it also helps the people and the community and the spaces around it, because everything is, I guess, affected by the vibration. And when I say affected by, I mean that one of the universal laws is everything does align to the highest frequency. Right. So when you go into a space and you do work on the grid lines, and that shifts and lifts the vibration of that particular area, all the people in that area have an opportunity then, and I say opportunity because free will is always very big part of this. They have the opportunity to step into that frequency and to raise their own frequency and harmonize with what's happening with the planet.
So let's talk about what's happening with the planet right now.
Okay. There's a lot happening with the planet right now. A big theme just for this week, actually, we've got the full moon coming up on the 27th of February, and that's been very much on my radar in my awareness. But at a more generalized level, I guess there's so many nodes and so many, we call them subgrids. So there's the major grid lines. One of the major grid is the Flower of Life grid, which is, if you think about like a 3D flower of life around the planet, that's one of the big, I guess, prominent primary grids that we have on planet Earth. And it is actually one of the ones that has come into a massive restoration over the last decade or so. And I have had some work to do with this, particularly in my trip that I went to in Egypt a few years ago. I think maybe 2015 or 2016, I went to Egypt, and we worked through the Flower of Life creation codes, because the Flower of Life grid actually holds the original creation codes for all life on this planet. It was actually one of the first grids that came into existence. And over the years, and some of this goes back even to Atlantean times, there have been disruptions to certain grids and things that have happened that now we're actually restoring and putting back into it as like a more primary sort of focus. So the Flower of Life grid has been restored over the last decade or so, and it's actually holding very well. It's actually very stabilized. But where we're seeing a lot of disruption at the moment is what we call the subgrid lines, and the subgrids are more localized. So, for example, here in Australia, we've got certain grids that are in Perth, we've got certain grids that are in Melbourne, and Melbourne in Victoria here in Australia has been under massive lockdown. They've had the highest cases of COVID. And it didn't surprise me in the slightest, because I've done so much work with the Melbourne grid lines and they just never seem to hold. I've been working with the Melbourne grid lines for about 4 years now. And every time I go there to run an event or do something, it's like the previous time has been completely overwritten. And it's like sometimes it's like worse than it was the last time I went, So yeah, when all of this COVID timeline got activated, Melbourne was one of the first to go down, and it was one of the first to get really, really affected quite badly because it had the densest energy, whereas the Perth grids have always held quite beautifully. And so, it just made sense. Like WA has had hardly any cases. We've actually been doing quite well. So you can see it. Like it was very obvious to me. I looked at the energetic grid lines, and then I looked at what was happening in, like the story of the 3D, and there was a direct correlation in such that the places that had the densest energy were the ones that were really being bombarded with all the COVID stuff. And then the places that were really holding quite well were actually, had nothing really going on. So it's almost like that polarity is becoming even more evident, and that the grid lines and what's actually happening at the energetic level has a direct impact or direct correlation in what I'm seeing is happening at the 3D as well.
But we're moving into, hopefully, right? Sort of anytime there's in order to have a breakthrough, you have to have a breakdown. And I'm wondering, and we've talked about this in different ways in different episodes, that we're sort of like the amount of momentum that's happening, sort of in the direction that let's say it almost feels like there has to be an explosion, a stopping point, a nothingness, a place where it transmutes. And I guess that's kind of what I want to know, is where, there's the role of the individual. And as you said, it is like the highest frequency wins. But we're at a time also that for a lot of people, it's hard for them to sustain a high frequency when they look out and they see everybody living in fear. So let's talk about a little bit of what you see, what you think is happening, and to translate that so people who will take that charge upon themselves to stay in a high frequency for the planet, if not just for themselves, because they know that their impact goes well beyond their own life experience.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will speak to is, so this big turning point, there's been a couple of instances in history where it's supposed to have been the big moment. The first one would have been 2012, when everybody was talking about this big shift, or the great, age of Aquarius coming in. And there were a number of reasons why it didn't happen in 2012. And that was because, first and foremost, humanity wasn't ready for it. Like, to have a shift that's so big, it can't occur against the collective consciousness and against the free will of the majority. And if the majority of the people on the planet, or at least a certain percentage of people, which I've heard is actually only 1%, are choosing that consciously, then no matter how much support and assistance we have from the outside, certain things just can't converge. So it didn't happen in 2012. And then we actually entered into a more extended timeline. And the second possible date that could have occurred was going to be December 21st, 2020, which is why the solstice was so huge. And I actually happened to be in Uluru, where there was a huge focal point for this great awakening. And again, parts of it, aspects of it did go through, aspects of it also didn't. One of the things that didn't occur on the 21st, which there was a potential to happen, was Star Family actually landing on the rocket Uluru. And that's one of the big reasons I was there. They sent me there just in case that timeline activated, and I would have been there to anchor them in and like welcome them all down. So that was one of the potential timelines. But by the time we got to about the 20th of December, I was like, okay, this isn't going to happen, because there was so much polarity and duality and conflict. And there was just a lot of mixed agendas in the whole Uluru solstice thing, that there wasn't enough unification in the consciousness of the people, not only just in the area, but even around the world, that were focusing in for that particular type of convergence to happen. So while there were some beautiful activations that did happen, and the meditation itself was incredible, there were still layers that had potential to come in that needed more time. So then there was, I guess you could say, a second attempt of the solstice, actually about a week ago, just in this month. And a few of us were focusing in on just bringing in that next level of convergence when it comes to the galactic side of things and Star Family coming in. And basically what's happening now is it's still happening. Like the Ascension timeline is still going ahead exactly as planned. It's just taking more of a time lag, because if there had been enough of a convergence on the 21st of December 2020, then it would have been that instantaneous transmutation that a lot of us were hoping for. But again, it comes down to the people, because, a lot of people say to me, hey, Eesha, if the starship thing is all real, and, there are all these beings helping us, why don't they just come down and save humanity? And that's not their role. And they can't do that. It is not the role of them to save anyone or do anything, because ultimately it's up to us. And free will plays such a massive role in planetary ascension that you can't have any group of star beings coming in and saying, oh, we're just going to get this planet to ascend because we feel like it would be best for them. You can see how that would be going against the concept of free will and the evolution that humanity is actually on.
Talk a little bit about Star Family and exactly what you mean.
When I speak about Star Family, I'm talking about beings that are from other planets and other dimensional realities that are very much here to help and support us. Some of the ones I connect to the most are Ashtar, so Ashtar Command, which some people have heard of. He's actually very close to me, and he's got a number of other beings. So his brother Ashura, I'm very close to as well, and his other brother Ashira, I'm also very close to as well. I connect with archangels, so Archangel Michael, Gabriel, Uriel. There's quite a few different beings like that. But basically, there's so many different beings in different star systems. And over the years, I've learned to connect with like hundreds upon hundreds. There's like Pleiadian beings, there's like Turian beings, Assyrian beings, Andromedan beings. And I connect to all of them. And so at different times and different stages, I do work with them to work with the grid lines and stuff. So even when I'm doing these missions like in Egypt or Uluru or Sedona or anything like that, they're often the ones that are guiding me, because they'll be able to see from the top what's actually happening, and then they'll just tell me, and then this is how I know where to go and what to do. And it's like having these non-physical friends in other dimensions that I work with so that we can do this work together.
Okay, that was what I was getting to. So talking about Star Family in a non-physical sense, in a non-physical sense, not that not that an alien that we see in the movies is landing on Earth necessarily. We're talking about non-physical energies, because we are eternal beings. We have energy. We do not die. So we understand that every thought that's been thought, every feeling that's been had, it still circulates in the universe as is. It can't be created nor destroyed. So we have all of whatever has always been. And so when you're talking about starship, I just want to make sure, because people might be thinking, does she mean an alien is going to land? A starship is literally going to land on the planet? Because then that might make them check out. So I want to make sure that people are up to speed with this conversation in terms of it, and you can feel it. And I know, again, Gary Zukav and I talked a little bit about it. Ainsley McLeod and I talked about soul lives and soul levels. And so how this all comes together is, those of you that listen to my show, I believe, are probably older souls who understand and aren't necessarily afraid of this conversation, and that you understand there's a deeper role for your presence on the planet at this time. Yes, it's for you, and yes, he'll come back, and we don't have to get it all done, and we're all on a journey together, and all of that. And here's what you can do to make a bigger difference for you and for others, because I know Abraham says it all the time. What you just said is that the highest frequency wins, and that it could be one person who is more powerful than millions who aren't in alignment, who aren't in a high frequency. And so this would be the time to have us really focus on. And again, it has to start with us though too. There's an understanding of what's going on, but then we have to make that personal. And the personal point is that, how do I walk around every day? What do I believe? What do I focus on? And I know for me, I have the luxury of working from home. I have the luxury of working from anywhere. I don't have to be in a certain place. I get to be with people if I want to be with people, which I do often. But at the same time, when I do venture out into the real world, and I feel the fear, and I feel the repressed anger, and I feel it becomes a challenge to stay centered, and it becomes a practice to check back in, to not allow myself to go down the path of being vibrationally kicked out of alignment because so many others necessarily are in the space with the opposite frequency and emotion. So for those of us that are aware of it, we understand it, and we're doing it, but we need to get better at it, and we want to do it more often. Do you have any advice about how one can necessarily, when the world is crazy in fear, and we know that what's going on isn't real, and it isn't the story that's really going on, and we want to focus on what we want, and we want to be in alignment with the greater good of all, and having everybody become more awake and conscious. And I've heard it's 3%. Although I would love it to be more, right? Because then that's very hopeful. What percentage does it need to be for this ascension to really get us there?
We need 1% of the population that are solidly anchoring a 5D vibration. So actually fully in that space. When we get 1% of the population that are holding it, the collective consciousness, it just kind of explodes. So my goal is, I'm just finding my 1%. That's it. I just want my 1% of people that I know that are really going to do this and are really going to hold that vibration. And that's it, because the power of that vibration is so strong that we actually don't need every single person on the planet to individually ascend. And while that is one pathway, there's actually a couple of ways you can do this. You can have 1% of the population that are very solidly anchoring a 5D vibrational high, and that'll tip everything over because it's the average vibration that we're really working with. Or we have everyone on the planet that lifts up just a little bit. So either one of those scenarios will have the same outcome.
And what are some things, because I know I'm speaking to some of that 1% who would be willing to continue focusing, and this is sort of another reason I guess I'm giving people, people come to me, and it's empowerment on all areas of their lives. And sometimes people wonder, well, aren't I supposed to do things for others? Or what am I supposed to do to help somebody else? Which usually is be the example. But so in this case, I'm giving you, this is another opportunity to be the example, but you're doing more than just being an example. You're actually making a planetary shift energetically in what we're asking for and where we're calling our next level of growth. So Eesha, what kind of things are you telling people to do or guiding them into in order to anchor in that frequency more often, more steadily, so that we can contribute to this 1%, really pushing this ascension along a little faster?
Right. Well, my number one go-to is my 4 foundation practices. I do have this listed on my website. It's a free download. Anyone can go and get it. It's a 17-minute practice, and the purpose of that practice is twofold. One is to balance your own energy field. So there's a couple of practices in there that get you centered into your heart and really connecting in with your own soul frequency. And then the other aspect of that is realigning ourselves with the energy field of the planet and the cosmos. So we connect into the earth and we connect up to source. And through that, it's not just then about us, but also about us being anchors of light for the planet and for that particular process. And so just by doing this practice, I tell everyone, just go do that practice every single day. And that's not just helping yourself, but it's also helping everyone. That's probably one of the best ways. But also, I think, people really overcomplicate this idea of how we can serve humanity. And I feel like, not everyone has to be in the pathway. I'm sure a lot of people watching this show are probably entrepreneurs who are doing, things like coaching and healing and that sort of thing. But also those who aren't. I mean, nothing beats the power of kindness. Like, if you go and walk, and see someone at the shops and you're at the cashier and you take 30 seconds to say hi to them and smile with them and make their day, that is raising the vibration. That's raising the vibration of that shop. That's raising the vibration of the community. So yeah, there's, definitely some big picture, big vision things that you can do. And those of us that are guided to do it on that big vision, that's amazing. But the biggest message I've been getting all year is for everyone just to do what we can in our own homes and in our own local areas. It's something as simple as connecting from your heart down to the heart of Gaia in your local area, in your localized grid. So you're sending energy to where you are. Because if every single person just takes care of their little patch of this earth that they're on, that's all we need. It doesn't need to be like a big, massive thing. It's actually very, very simple. And I think, there is a power and gratitude in recognizing that each person on this planet is like a light on this planet. There are 7.8 billion potential lights on this planet. If we all just light ourselves up, that's just incredible, that in and of itself.
Great advice. So it's eeshapatel.com, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And what's the name of the free document or 17-minute practice?
It's called the 4 foundation practices.
The 4 foundation practices. You can get it at eeshapatel.com. If you're listening to some of the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Okay. So in terms of becoming your own light, not only for yourself and your family, but for the planet and this ascension, any other messages that you're being guided to share about, again, obviously this is what we can do, but about what's coming and in terms of, what we can expect? Or I know sometimes I had seen something that I did not share with everybody. In fact, I probably didn't share with any of you because I was afraid you wouldn't like it. I was afraid that you would think I was crazy, and it was around election time, and it was someone in Sedona actually channeling from her guides something, or she wasn't even channeling. She just got messages, and it was a very let's just say polarizing message that when it came through, she really took 20 minutes just to sort of set the stage so people wouldn't get pissed off and offended and react. And when I saw it, I had to assess, do I think my people can handle this? And I decided, no, I didn't think they could because of the heightened state of survival and around the election. So I didn't share it with many people at all. Although I heard it and I felt it and I agreed with it 100%. I just didn't feel like people were ready for that. So, but what I did like hearing during that time frame in the shifting that was going on, sometimes things have to get worse before they get better, or there's that peaking point just in anything. It could be, the caterpillar becoming the butterfly and the goo and the breaking out of so all the visualizations of transformation really are having a baby, right? It's a messy process and we're in a messy process. So I guess the question is, are you getting any information about it being any messier than it already is? How close are we to the peaking point? So yeah.
I find this conversation very difficult because I have seen a lot and it hasn't all been positive. I'm actually getting teary as I say this because of certain things that didn't go through last year. The process has become messier than what it needs to be, and there's going to be more casualties than we actually need. And I find that very, very difficult to say. But in saying that, my big message above all of that overrides everything is that we always have a choice. I'm looking at the timelines now and I'm like, cool, okay, there's some work to be done, there's some serious work to be done. And for me, it's like my role just amplified like 1,000-fold last year when I was like, oh my God, like this is where we're heading, And I was like, right, I now need to just, what I thought I was going to have like 5 years to do, I'm now trying to do in like 1 year, because as certain timelines have become activated, particularly when the COVID timeline got activated, that shifted everything. That 2020 was supposed to be the big year of transformation, and when the COVID timeline got activated right at the end of 2019, like the timing of that, it was December 2019 when it all started. It was like it derailed so much of the potential of what 2020 was supposed to be. In saying that, though, my big message is always that at the end of the day, no one else has power over us. No one else actually has the potential to do anything more than us. And so, yeah, like we can look at timelines and we can say, okay, cool, that might be looking a little bit challenging. It might be looking a little bit of a roller coaster, which at times it does. It really does. But we can change that. We have absolutely every power to change that, because the second enough of us decide that, no, we're not putting up with that, and we decide, actually, I want to just focus on the ascended earth and I want to focus on my frequency, we can shift it today. There is nothing stopping us from actually having that shift today. And this is why, for me, I've just gone hardcore all year on media and podcasting, getting my meditations out there and just spreading that message to people, because like as much as you can, go into the psychic realms and read the timelines and see what's coming is always malleable and it's always changing. In its current state, if I were to look at it right now, like in this exact moment, I would say to you, okay, cool. Like the most activated prominent timeline does involve some challenge and does involve some difficulty, but that's not set in stone. No timelines are ever set in stone. And it's always us as the creators of our reality, as conscious creators, to be able to change that. So the second we go, okay, cool, this is the current potential, we still have a choice and capacity to shift, because nothing is more powerful than that. The one thing that we always have in this universe is free will and the capacity to consciously create. And we are consciously creating whether we like it or not. So the most important thing that we can do at this time is to actually accelerate this process of ascension and to go back into the optimized timelines, which we currently, since the whole COVID thing happened, we sort of dropped off the highest potential timeline into some secondary and tertiary timelines. We can still go back to that primary timeline and have a much smoother process of ascension just by taking the time to really feel into and visualize the ascended earth. Now, by that, I mean, one of the big messages I got all through last year, and I did this for myself and I did this for my clients all through the year, we just focused on the ascended earth as if it was already happening now. Now, you understand the power of visualization and the power of collapsing timelines. When we work in the quantum field, the ascended earth is already here. And I know that because I see it and I feel it. I'm connecting to it every day, but there's not enough people connecting to it at this time to bring that into 3D reality manifestation. So when we take the time to feel into that 5D earth, which is beautiful, it's actually so peaceful, it's so loving, it's so calm. I see myself every day on 5D earth and this beautiful planet that has completely healed and completely restored. And so in some ways, that timeline, it's right there. It's like on the tip of my fingers. It's so close, it's so tangible. I can feel it and I can see it. And we just need enough people to tap into that right now for that timeline to just have a quantum leap forward and basically happen straight away. So there's still nothing stopping it from happening. It's just that the gap right now is that not enough people are receiving this information or are taking enough action on what we can consciously do to create that reality right now, because it's definitely possible. And actually 5D Earth already exists now. It's already well and truly created.
And I believe you 100%. So what that leads me to ask you, and if you haven't done it, I will attempt to do it until you can do it. Have you done a guided visualization or meditation that we could follow to connect with that? Or is that your own practice? Because if you haven't done it, I want you to do it. And until you do it, I'm going to do it. So everyone who's listening, anyone in my inner circle membership, I will do this for you until we get Eesha's version of it. Right. Because I'm not going to put any work on you and ask you to do it. But have you done it before? Whether be in on social media or on your website?
I've done it for myself and I've done it in some of my live online workshops and stuff, but I don't have a recorded version of it. In saying that though, it is on my to-do list and quite high up the list actually. I have this movement that I'm creating, which is basically to create 5D Earth. And what I want to do is just create, from a logistical point of view, it's going to be create a landing page, put this meditation on there, and then just like throw a bunch of budget at it, get it out into the world, and just have like millions of people doing this. So like there is a process in place that I want to launch this thing at a very, very big scale. And obviously I'll be coming straight to you when I have it and say, here, share it with your people. So it's not done yet, but it is in the process of happening, because I see the importance of it, of when everyone comes together to actually create 5D Earth. I mean, it's so, so powerful. You know, at the moment, I've only been doing it in small groups of maybe like 100, 200, maybe like a few hundred people tops that are doing it at once. But when we have like thousands or tens of thousands or even 1 million people doing this meditation at the same time together, we can definitely collapse those timelines. So 100% needs to happen.
I'm going to take a crack at it until you finish yours. I will be happy to share yours collectively. I'm only going to share mine with my inner circle membership because they love me. And if it's stupid, then they won't judge me. It's not going to be for everybody until I've tested it out, but I will share yours across the board when it's done. Any other thoughts, words of wisdom, and visions besides the fact that again, everything we've been saying is really to anchor everybody into and acknowledging that we still have the power to make transformation happen at a more rapid speed than we are. It's really, again, back to the basic law of attraction principle of what we focus on expands. So if we are allowing ourselves to be taken out of alignment by what's going on, and I'm guilty of it, I'm absolutely guilty of it. I have 3 Sag planets. I mean, I kick in like lack of freedom sometimes. Like that part of me the caged animal wants to run. And I have to bring it back and, try to tap in and kind of go in a different direction. So we all at some level have distractions and challenges to staying in alignment and staying centered and staying high vibration. So that's really the basic message of today, besides obviously explaining the ascension and the hope and the power that you still have to help make that happen, not only for everybody else, but for yourself, and to live a true reality. Because even if I believe, and I know that even if, let's say nothing changes, but it will, let's say nothing else changes, when you yourself are ascended in a higher frequency, none of the shit that happens to everybody else happs to you, because you're not in the same frequency to receive it. So you literally protect yourself in a higher frequency when you can live there. So sort of the laws of the world right now won't apply to you, because you'll zig and zag and won't ever be in the same room or same situation, because you will be vibrating at a level that it doesn't exist. So thank you, Eesha, for coming on the show today. I want to make sure everybody knows that most likely when she does this meditation and guided visualization, that she probably is going to put it in her Facebook group. So if you're not already a part of Eesha's Facebook group, go to facebook.com/groups/Eesha Patel. It is on the screen. It'll be in the show notes. You can look for her on Facebook. Absolutely follow her if you're not already, to keep up to date and to stay positive and stay in your power, and to get all the tools that you need to not only help your life, but to help this whole process move forward. Thanks, Eesha.
Beautiful. Thank you, JJ.